A black doctor says Delta Airlines flight attendant rejected her offer to help an ailing passenger because she didn't believe she was a doctor. The incident took place October 9th on a flight from Detroit to Minneapolis. It has outraged tens of thousands of professional black women across America. Houston OBGYN Tamika Cross reached out to a passing flight attendant after she heard the page for medical assistance. The flight attendant dismissed her offer of help. A moment later, accepted the help of a white male doctor who showed up.
As she's like going past my seat, I raised my hand trying to grab her attention and explained to her that I was a physician. And she immediately replied, saying, "Oh, no, sweetie, put your hand down. We're looking for physicians or nurses. We need some type of medical personnel. We have an emergency right now. We don't have time to talk to you." I see there is another gentleman that's coming from the front of the plane. And this was a middle-aged Caucasian male walking towards the back of the plane where we were and where the incident had occurred. And so she said, "Thank you for your help." She was very polite. She said, "Thank you for your help, but he's a physician and he has his credentials, And so at that point, of course, there's a lot of thoughts going through my mind. I'm sitting here in disbelief, like, wow, okay. And my blood's boiling.
Cross, a fourth-year resident at the University of Texas Health Science Center in Houston, she posted her experience on Facebook saying she was sick of being disrespected and called the flight attendant's actions blatant discrimination. The response was swift and overwhelming. Thousands of black female doctors, some wearing lab coats, posted pictures of themselves on Twitter with hashtags Tamika Cross, we do exist, and what a doctor looks like. Delta Airlines says it was troubled by the discrimination accusation and is investigating the incident. Dr. Cross says she doesn't want to get the flight attendant fired. She just wants to shed light on what she calls innate biases in the hopes the flight attendant will get some sensitivity training. Joining us right now is Vikisha Fripp, founding board member of Artemis Medical Society, also a doctor as well, plus our panel, Spencer Overton, Dolores Reyes, and Dr. Jason Johnson. So this, clearly this is, for a flight attendant to even go, "I'm sorry, you're not real."
Right.
It's crazy.
That's the basis of this discussion. So when have we ever had to give credentials for being a physician in an emergency? Typically you give care. Afterwards, if you need some validation, if you think something is required, then fine. But in that instance, they called for a doctor. She identified herself as being a doctor. She should have been allowed to do what she does.
Now, she says she doesn't want the flight attendant fired.
Right.
What should Delta do?
So we're looking to Delta to be transparent in their interview, to represent, to do the interview with a diverse team, and then to take the lead. They propose to be global leaders, right? So take the lead in this and educate not only Americans, but global citizens that this is what a doctor looks like, and that we look like many things, and that when we are called, we always show up, but we're never given the respect we deserve.
What's also interesting is that she didn't question the credentials of the white male who stood up.
But his credentials were shown, right? He was a white male, and so that's the issue.
Go ahead, Spencer.
This implicit bias is a real issue. It's not just in terms of Delta. It's not just in terms of black women. If you look at the studies, they show you get resumes, identical resumes. You have a stereotypically black name, stereotypically white name. Whites are 50% more likely to get the job. White state legislators, much more likely to respond to someone with a stereotypically white name than black name. Studies across the board have shown that this exists. Black folks, there are these thousands of microaggressions, right, that really add up here. And this shows that, it doesn't just hurt African Americans, it can hurt, whites or others who are in need of medical care or something else.
And of course, we also we saw Senator Tim Scott talk about that, how he's been checked for his credentials going into the United States Senate, even though his pen, you only get that if a U.S. senator.
Right.
Dolores, but asking you though, was Governor Mike Pence though recently, where even the last debate where he said, look, there's too much discussion about these implicit biases when it comes to police departments. The reality is it exists on Delta Airlines when it comes to a doctor, in police departments, in corporate America. So to act as if it doesn't exist, that's crazy.
I think there's some level of bias that does exist, absolutely.
But Pence said it's just too much talk about that.
Well, I think that our country is totally divided. I think that at some point we're going to have to come together at some point, but it doesn't negate the fact that that it does exist. I do think that our conversation or our narrative of the day needs to be tempered in such a way that it forges a way for us to move forward as a country.
Jason.
I'm going to be more candid. They should be fired. right? Because if that was my loved one on a plane who was in an emergency situation and needed a doctor, and they denied a I don't care if it's a man, woman, straight, gay, trans, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, you get the first doctor you can and save the person who matters to me on the plane. And this is dangerous. And and this isn't the only instance. You had the instance last week where you had the black trans woman who was kicked off on United flight for wearing a Black Panther hat and an ASAP Rocky shirt. This is another example of not just implicit bias, but how it affects commerce, how it affects health, how it affects life, and it's absolutely unacceptable. And I'm somebody who flies Delta all the time.
Right, I'm from Atlanta, so Delta, I'm familiar with Delta. But I think these are unique opportunities, right? So if we don't talk about it, it never gets discussed, right? So these things unfortunately have to happen. Not to take any light away from Dr. Cross, but as an African-American physician, a female, how many times has this happened? We're used to this, and we should not be. But since this has happened, now use this platform to educate people, right? That's what sparks conversations. You have to have something that occurs. God bless her, she's still a resident. She didn't have a mouthpiece. But we have a mouthpiece, and we stand with her to say, this is not right. We will not go along with this. We will not accept your urinal. We don't know where the cafeteria is. I can't tell you what time it closes. I don't know any of that information. What I can tell you, though, if you need a plastic surgeon, I'm your girl. I can tell you if you're gonna die, I can do CPR, I can save you. I can tell you a million things I can do to help you, but what I can't do is be less than who I am.
All right, Dr. Vikisha Fripp, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Speaking of issues being raised, NAACP Board of Directors voted this weekend